Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 14, Episode 148. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Tuesday, Dave. Dave, I think one of our first summer shows of the offseason as we get things started. You'll be very proud of me, Dave. Just a quick bit of nonsense here to start the show off. I watched a movie this weekend, not one of the many you recommended. I know. People are pulling over in their cars right now, although it was not one of your recommended ones. And one of my favorite actors is Jeffrey Donovan, who's been in like Law and Order and Burn Notice. And I just saw he was in this random movie. I just saw like a 30-second clip. I said, oh, that'll be a fun watch on a Friday night. It was the movie Sicario, which is about a Mexican drug cartel. Not a fun movie for the family. I quickly realized that it's a very intense movie that leaves you kind of depressed at the end. So that was my Friday night, just unknowingly watching this just kind of crazy, horrific film. But it was a genuinely good movie, just not an optimistic tone to be found in that one. But I did watch a movie.
What was the actor's name?
Jeffrey Donovan. He was in Burn Notice, which was a cheesy but good show on USA for many years, and I think he just left Law and Order. Though I never really watched the show. Did you ever watch Law and Order?
No, I never got into that. Heck, I've seen obviously episodes of The Sopranos over the years, just kind of, occasional type thing, but I never even watched the full Sopranos. It was just, back then it was work and work, and today it's really still work. Although I've kind of limited the things that I've watched. I like war documentaries. I tell you one thing I have gotten into this off season though, that Gold Rush series and all like that. Well, they've got a kind of a spin-off of that with Freddie Dodge and Juan, and it's something along the lines of mine saving. And what they do is they go out to these various gold mines for a week, and then they try to make whatever changes they can to the mine to help the miners catch more gold and all like that. Evidently, there's 3 seasons of that, so I've been slowly rolling through the 3 seasons of that. But I've been finding that Gold Rush series kind of enjoyable there. But
nice. Is that on History or
I think it's either Discovery or A&E or one of those, I think.
Okay. Cool.
I watch them on demand, on the cable system. And I want to say it's Discovery, but I'm not sure.
Nice. Well, good. I'm glad you're finding something non-sports related. We did get to watch Game 7 of the Stanley Cup last night, which was a great game. Let's hope the Steelers defense can play like the Panthers defense in 2024, because they locked McDavid and company down.
Absolutely. That ended up being a very exciting series overall. I mean, for Florida to get out 3-0 and Edmonton to roar back to get it to 3-3. I really thought I was rooting for Florida last night, but I really thought Edmonton throughout the series was the better team, even in several games that they lost. And I thought Edmonton was going to take it last night, but that's not the case. And now, man, you got to go all the way back to 1990 something for the last time a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup there. So, I mean, that's quite a span for Canada. And last night was probably the closest shot they've had in several years when it comes to that. But the College World Series is over with now, and the Pirates still dropping games, right?
Yeah, at least one thing remains the same with the Pirates struggling. Yeah, the last time a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup, I was looking this up last night, I was 1 month old. So it's been a little while now for the teams north of the border. But we'll stop all that and talk about some Pittsburgh Steelers. A couple things to note here today. Pittsburgh filling up the roster spots they created with waiving and releasing Denzel Mims and Trenton Thompson. Last weekend, they added a receiver and a defensive lineman. The receiver they added was Jacob Copeland, who's been on and off Pittsburgh's practice squad. I think this is his 3rd stint with the Steelers overall. Never appeared in an NFL game, but he'll be some wide receiver depth, essentially replacing Mims 1-to-1. Other signing they made was Willington Previlon, a defensive lineman claimed off waivers from Atlanta. For anyone asking, he was not with Arthur Smith. Previlon signed with Atlanta like 2 days after Arthur Smith was fired early in 2024, previously with the Packers and Cowboys, a couple other teams as well. He's also never appeared in an NFL game. So those are the moves there, Dave, and Copeland and Previlon.
Them ain't specialists.
Yeah, I'm sorry for anyone getting their hopes up about punters. None to be found, unfortunately.
Yeah, them ain't USFL or UFL players. Yeah, a couple of look, I mean, Copeland obviously, has a little bit of a recent history with the team, being on the practice squad last year and all, and Pensacola boy as well too. He went to Escambia High School in Pensacola, and that's the same high school that Emmitt Smith went to in Pensacola. I know that because I lived there and played against Escambia.
Run over by Emmitt Smith.
And run over by Emmitt Smith a couple of times. Was that
at Escambia High School, or was that?
Oh yeah, that. I think one game was at Escambia. I think one was at Catholic High, but
okay.
it didn't matter. Field,
it hurt all the same.
There was no field advantage against did not come and play versus Emmitt Smith. That man was a grown ass man, even way back then, had a beard and everything back there. But yeah, not needle movers here by any sense of the imagination, and not expected this time of the off season. Like you did note the other day, though, you did kind of wonder if maybe they'd go the specialist route, or if we might see a UFL guy or two come onto the team. And look, it's a long summer. Moving forward, injuries or whatnot, short lines on the 91-man roster. Once you get into training camp, there will be more moves forthcoming. But at least from where we sit right now, it's kind of hard to imagine, at least between now and the start of training camp, which is now about a month away here, of seeing many more roster moves, barring really any surprises at this point.
When you see the team trade one receiver for another, Mims or Copeland, that makes sense. I thought it was a little more interesting, and maybe this is dangerous for the idle speculation of late June when there's not a ton to occupy our time, but to add another defensive lineman replacing Thompson, the safety, with a defensive lineman, they got a bunch of those guys. Is this just standard depth? I had the thought, and again, just total speculation, are they anticipating a hold-in from Cam Hayward, maybe assuming their defensive line, maybe one man short to begin camp, and so they want to add extra depth with a guy like Previlon? I don't know, but that's a thought that crossed my mind.
Yeah, I mean, not bad speculation on your part. I mean, if you look down at the defensive linemen that they have under contract now, DeMarvin Leal, Logan Lee, Montravius Adams, Keanu Benton, Cameron Hayward, Isaiah Loudermilk, Larry Ogunjobi, Willington Previlon, Braden Fehoko, Dean Lowry, Jonathan Marshall, and I think Jacob Slade. That's a large group of defensive linemen, is it not?
Yeah, how many is that? Not including Previlon. How many did they roster prior to the move?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 minus 1 would be 11. So I guess that makes it around 12 now.
Yeah, so 11, you probably get to a camp that way. So that's kind of where I come in and say, if they think that Hayward might, if they anticipate a contract extension not getting done with Hayward before camp and a hold-in is at least possible, maybe this team is trying to be a little proactive in that regard. So we'll see. Overall, again, just speculation on my part, Previlon. He does have the size and the look of a Pittsburgh Steelers defensive end, regarded as a good athlete from Rutgers, was their MVP one season. Again, has not played in an NFL game regular season. Played in a bunch of preseason action. So we'll see on him. But that's the moves this team has made.
At 35, I don't think you have to see Cameron Hayward do a whole hell of a lot, throughout training camp. I know he likes to get out there and lead by example, and especially take part in probably some of those 7 shots periods and stuff like that. But that combined with maybe watching his contract situation moving forward into the early part of training camp, that could play a part in this. And look, we don't know who else might be dinged right now.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
Every year, about 2 weeks ahead of training camp, I usually try to write up kind of a look ahead at the health of the team and who may or may not have to start training camp on PUP. And 8 times out of 10, you get a surprise. It shows up on the active PUP list. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And, maybe there's a minor injury or someone had a minor procedure that we don't know about.
Sure, that's a great point too. And Ogunjobi's 30 years old and always seems to be nicked up in training camps. Maybe they're going to manage him and make sure his reps are a little bit more on the reduced side to make sure he's good for week 1. It's a huge year for Ogunjobi, so that's a possibility as well. And it could just be standard D-line depth, notwithstanding Ogunjobi or Hayward situations. That's also on the table. But I just had that thought and wanted to pass it along. And obviously, we'll get our questions answered in exactly 1 month, because the team will be out there on July 25th for the first practice of the 2024 training camp. I think tickets are going to go on sale here in just about a half hour for St. Vincent College. So speaking of which, Dave, I kind of talked about it. Some of you had a good article talking about all the cash this team is likely to spend the next 75 days. It's going to be a really interesting 1 month to see before camp, do any extensions get done with Pat Freiermuth, with Cam Hayward, with Najee Harris? Could there be a surprise? Some thoughts on Justin Fields. Could he look for an extension? Could Pittsburgh have interest in doing that to get a quarterback under contract past 2024? So I think it's going to be a really telling next month to see what deals do get done. Maybe just as importantly, what deals do not get done.
Yeah, as you mentioned, when I wrote the article, it was 77 days out. It's now, 75 days out from week 1. And obviously, Omar Khan said in that recent interview with 93.7 The Fan, and it wasn't a surprise at all, that they're going to keep the precedent of not negotiating contracts once the regular season gets underway. So that would put us at a hard line in the sand at 75 days. It might seem like a long time, but that will start clicking off the calendar super quick at this point. And I think the big question is right now is indeed how much more actual cash will this team spend moving forward? I think, I know that my expectations for most of the offseason has been that we will see Pat Freiermuth sign a contract extension at some point between now and week 1 of the regular season. I'll be surprised if that doesn't happen. As far as the increase in cash spending when it comes to him goes, I think at max you're looking at maybe around $13 million more as far as him. We've talked the Cameron Hayward situation to where just every week it seems like talking about him. The thing with him is, if he does get an extension, how much new cash are we actually talking about here? Because he's on the books for $16 million cash spend as it sits right now. We've been talking a lot about the potential of a no new money in 2024 possible extension for him. And if indeed that's what winds up being the case, obviously there's no new cash spending there when it comes to him. But maybe at most, and this would be the high end of the situation, at least in my eyes, maybe you give him an extra $2 million as part of an extension as far as the new money in 2024 goes. That feels like that would be an extreme situation there. So overall, not expecting much, if any, new cash being spent on Cameron Hayward. Moving forward, who are the other candidates for a potential extension this offseason? We've talked a lot recently about Najee Harris. And why are we talking about Najee Harris specifically? I think most of the discussion now this week on Najee Harris is because of 2 things. Omar Khan was on the radio and was asked about the team deciding not to pick up his 5th-year option back in May. I think that's one reason. And the other reason I think we're talking about Najee Harris this week is because coming off of last week or 10 days ago, Ramondre Stevenson signing that new deal with the New England Patriots there. So there hasn't been a lot of discussion about Najee Harris leading up to, I think, this week. I think you can thank Depot for maybe starting to have a couple more posts and conversation about that. But I mean, most people would probably lend, would lean to think there's no freaking way a Najee Harris contract extension gets done. I get that. I certainly get every element of that, especially on the heels of the team not picking up his fifth-year option back in May. But if there was another player out there that could wind up with a contract extension that would make sense to some degree, it would be him. And then that in turn would create another kind of sizable cash spend for 2024. Moving past Freiermuth, moving past Hayward, moving past Najee Harris, who else is out there that at least plausible to some degree of maybe signing a contract extension between, in the next 75 days? I think at this point, James Daniels said, over the last couple of weeks that he's not expecting a contract extension. So that doesn't seem very likely when that comes out of the player's mouth at this point of the offseason. Beyond that, Alex, maybe Justin Fields. I mean, I think you could kind of make an argument if he would agree, if the two sides could come to some agreement on, a smart, maybe 1 year extension. I don't know. It would take a lot, in my opinion, to get a deal done that would be pleasing to both sides. But I guess in theory, it's plausible to a degree. So I think that's someone else that, probably last on the list as far as probability goes, but at least that's another name. Yeah. Am I missing any other name of a player currently under contract? Now, look, there are other ways to spend cash, right? And that would be signing a player that's not on the roster right now to a sizable contract and or trading for a wide receiver specifically that's not under contract. Those are two other ways to spend cash on this point. But as far as extensions go, those names I rattled off, I think that's it. That's the list, right?
I think so. Other pending free agents, obviously Russell Wilson will play his 1 year deal out. We'll see where things are at next March. Dan Moore, Dante Jackson, other pending free agents, they of course won't get extensions. So I think those are the names, and really primarily it's Harris, Freiermuth, and Hayward.
Right. And once again, Hayward, even if you extend him, how much new cash is going to be there?
Sure, it might be nothing, potentially, depending on how the structure of this thing goes. So that's why it's interesting. I know that obviously, there's nothing that prevents this team from doing extensions once camp begins. And so there's, I don't want to make a line in the sand and say that it has to get done before camp, but we know Omar Khan has generally been doing these deals in June earlier than what Kevin Colbert did whenever he's been able to. And so it's kind of going to be the storyline. And then, of course, once you go to camp, if these deals aren't done, what is the participation and involvement from a Hayward, a Harris, a Freiermuth? Not that holdings are going to be this dramatic story, but they're going to be notable when it's a starting tight end, a starting running back, and starting defensive lineman, and one of the faces of the franchise in Cam Hayward. So just kind of previewing what the storylines could or may not be, depending on what happens over the next 4 weeks.
I have the Steelers right now as spending, at least when it comes to the top 53 players under contract as the roster sits right now. I have this team's at around $203 million in a cash spend when it comes to the top 53. I think when you tack on a practice squad, you tack on, off-season workout bonuses that'll be coming up due. That payment will hit sometime in August. When you talk about potential injured reserve players to start the week one of the season, when you add all of those together, you get kind of a projected cash spend at $210 million. And if you compare that to the percent cash spend compared to the league salary cap number of $255.4 million, that's just 82.2% cash spend, cash related to cap at that point, which is, I mean, even for a year one, you could obviously get away with that as a year one spend. Look, there is no hard true rule in year one of a 3-year cash spending period in the CBA that says you have to spend this percentage of the cap in cash, but you also would think that the teams over a 3-year span don't want to get themselves, unless they have a hard plan in place to get into year 3, when they've got to spend, 120% of the 3rd year number, cap number in cash, because they're having to play catch up at that point. So you would expect teams to stay, right around the 90 to 95% cash to cap percentage ratio, even in year one. With the Steelers at 82.2% as we sit projected at $210 million. That's why I kind of wrote the post with a slant that I really believe, Alex, that you could see this team spend at least $20 million more in cash moving forward in these next 75 days now. Now, obviously, if Pat Freiermuth is one of those, we're in agreement. You'd be surprised if Pat Freiermuth's not done, right?
I think he's going to, but I'm still a little less confident than you are. And we've heard nothing about that other than Freiermuth being asked, I think, during OTAs, just said, I leave it to my agent. I don't know what's going on there. So it doesn't mean that it's not happening. Pittsburgh works behind the scenes probably better than any other team in the NFL, but we've heard really not a peep on a long-term deal.
Okay, but as far as probability goes, he tops the list, right?
Sure. He'd be number one, more likely than not to have a new deal by at least week 1.
All right, and let's say that ends up on the top side of the additional cap spend of $13 million. Do I think it's going to come? I just want to budget enough here, to make sure I overshoot. So let's say that's a $13 million additional cap spend there. That's 13 of the 20 million. There's still another roughly $7 million out there. If that's going to come via an extension, that very well could come via a Najee Harris deal, if indeed one gets done at all. Outside of that, for them to reach the 20 million additional cash spend mark between now and week 1, it would have to come from the outside. It feels like it, because even if Cameron Hayward gets done, probably not looking at a huge additional cash spend, if any additional cash spend at all when it comes to him. So that's what we're looking at. Here's the hardest thing here. This is year 1 of the 3-year period. And, you can go back and look at year 1 of the previous 3 period, but you're not, you can't rubber stamp it because things change over time.
Sure. I was going to ask, though, what was that year 1, just to gauge it 3 years ago?
I would have to go look.
Okay.
I don't have that pulled up right now. I want to say it was obviously, I don't remember. I have to go look back.
Probably higher than 82%, I'm guessing.
I don't want to say wrong because I don't have it in front of me right now. I'd have to go back and look overall, but it does seem like it was at least under the 90%. I'll tell you that.
Okay. I mean, it would be potentially useful just to get an idea of how Pittsburgh approached things before. I think, again, it's no guarantee for how things go in the future, but it'd be a useful number to pull.
I will tell you this overall, though, when you look at the way it's tracking right now for the Steelers this offseason, they are set to be one of the, let's say one of the 5 lowest cash spending teams in 2024.
Do you know who those other teams are they're grouped with currently?
I think Denver's one of them, if you can believe it, even though they're having to pay
Russell Wilson all that money.
Russell, which in turn does not require the Steelers to pay a lot of money here. Let me see if I can pull up cash flows here real quick.
Just be curious on the correlation of what other teams. Are they a mix of powerhouses and favorites? Are they all bottom feeders? Are they all rookie quarterbacks? I mean, I'd just be curious to see if we can gather any trends from the 4 other teams. Probably not.
Now here's what Over the Cap has right now, but Over the Cap does not base things off the top 53 on the roster. They're looking at the total cash spends as rosters are right now. And obviously those are going to decrease because you got a lot of guys on that roster beyond the 53 spot that don't have any guaranteed money involved, and basically it's just going to wipe away come to week one. But the way they base it right now is off of full rosters, what the cash spending would be if teams carried their full 90, 91 man rosters right now. And the bottom 5 teams they have are the Rams, the Steelers, the Broncos, the Packers, and the Cowboys in last place. And obviously the Cowboys are expected to, I think, get big deal, potentially get big deals done with who?
Prescott and Lamb.
Yeah, Prescott and Lamb, and who knows what's going to happen with Micah Parsons and all like that. But Cowboys and the Steelers of all teams in the bottom 5, at least when it comes to current cash spending right now. Now, do I think, obviously next 75 days, these lists are all going to change, but unless the Steelers get busy spending some cash moving forward, they're going to start the season in the bottom 5 of cash spending for 2024. How does that make you feel? How does that make fans feel when it comes to year one?
I don't know if I have a feeling or real reaction to it. Again, have to see how things look by week one, because these things can and will change potentially dramatically based on any moves that Pittsburgh makes, any extensions, any trades. I just kind of look at the roster itself, and obviously Pittsburgh is fortunate to be paying the quarterback position so little because of the circumstances surrounding Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and that helps ease the cash amount when you're paying your quarterbacks probably the fewest dollars in football.
Sure, and you got a very cheap wide receiver room right now. You've got probably easily the cheapest quarterback room right now. I guess though, with is that what's the phrase you like to use? Is that a bug or the
feature of the bug?
Yeah, is that a feature or the bug there? And and if you're saving it in one area, should you be spending it? Should is an excuse? At this point.
Yeah, I think when it comes to quarterback, I'm okay with that being a bottom dollar room, because it just, the way it's not necessarily bottom dollar talent. We'll have to see how Fields looks and how Wilson does. There's some murkiness there. It's not an elite quarterback room, but getting, there were just special circumstances of Fields being available because the Bears had the number 1 overall pick, and Wilson being available for the minimum because of the contract structure and his release from Denver. So I'm okay with that. Receiver, I'd like that room to become more expensive. I don't want that to be the cheapest wide receiver room in the NFL. I know Pickens is on the rookie deal, and that's a benefit, obviously, but that's a situation where you sit there and say, okay, you don't want to get what you pay for. You want to be able to add to it and pay some more money to round out that room.
Do you think that, look, you can't hide, teams can't hide from having to spend cash over 3-year periods. So in other words, teams over, starting this year, next year, and then the year following, teams have to spend at least 90% of the 3-year total of the cap in cash. Now look, you can spend well above that if you want to. You don't see a lot of teams go 140, 150% of the cap number in cash a lot of times. But would you like to see it balanced out more? Obviously the NFLPA would like to see 100% of at least the cap number spent in cash. And I wouldn't hurt my feelings to see that as well too. But should there be some sort of limit on top of that? Say 110, teams at most can spend 110% of the cap number in cash, or is that a big deal?
You know this stuff better than I do, but I'm not sure why would the NFLPA want to limit the amount of cash teams can spend. The more they spend on players, the better it is for players. So I wouldn't put a hard cap
I'm just
on
looking
things.
at it from a competitive advantage system. But within all that, too, is you have a salary cap system. So even if you went out there and blew, if you went on a huge cash spending above the cap number in cash in one particular year, you still have to manage the cap behind that. And that's I guess would be the counterweight to I'm answering my own question here, but that would be the counterweight to that. Yeah, have at it, spend all the cash you want, because at some point you've got to manage the cap related to it.
Yeah, it's not like, and I don't know the salary caps in other sports as well, but like the NBA with the luxury tax, where there's a soft cap and a hard cap, and you can really go over what that quote unquote cap is and just pay all the taxes to come along with it. The NFL doesn't have that. It's a true hard cap, and that's the balancing act and the counterweight, as you said, to teams that may want to spend a lot in one year. They won't be able to do that continually. They'll have to decrease it at some point. So I'm fine with the system as it stands right now.
I am as well. So long story short, the Steelers look like they're going to be bottom of the league as far as cash spending goes league-wide in 2024. Quick rabbit hole real quick, because this crossed my mind the other day, and I wanted to bring it up on a show since then, and I forgot. We're talking about cash and cap and all like that. Just don't make a I'm just asking you. I don't care who's, because we're gonna tune a lot of people out real quick here. But do you think some sort of system that the NFL has in place right now when it comes to cash and cap, do you think something similar to that would work in NIL in college?
Oh wow, that's a whole can of worms there. So you're saying are you saying to institute a salary cap in college sports?
Yeah, I think if somehow you put some sort of a cash cap system in place for college football, that in other words, to add some sort of competitive balance to it, and instead of all these schools just buying the best players, is it plausible to put in some you can spend this cash, but you have to have an NIL cap related to that. And then, if you want to sign this player to an NIL deal for 5 years, you could prorate the cap versus, you see what I'm saying? I mean, you could probably structure that.
It's just put a number on the NIL money you can shell out as a school or for a football program, and just make it I think it's a lot less messy than getting into salary cap stuff. But I mean, I think if anytime in college sports they've tried to put a limit on things, schools just work around it. If you put an NIL cap on college sports, it's going to go back to the backroom deals that were made prior to NIL, and then the whole, now you're able to pay players and they're basically being treated as employees. How does it impact things? I mean, that's a whole logistical nightmare, I'm sure, to try to work out.
All right, it just ran across my mind a couple of days ago, so I want to bring it up. All right, move us on.
I think it's a good point, though, with NIL, because you're right. The money it's exploded. It's just crazy. I think Matt Rule, Nebraska's head coach, former Panthers head coach, has talked about it. It costs at least $1 million to get a quarterback these days, and that price will only go up over time. And there's a strain on schools, strain on boosters, and college football is going to have to figure out a system at some point. I'm all for NIL, guys getting paid, personally 100% for it, but there probably has to be a smarter structure than kind of a wild west that's taking place right now.
All right, back to the cash thing to wind that up real quick there. I think there's a decent chance that the Steelers spend at least another $20 million more in cash above what they're set to spend with their top 53 at this point. I think a good chunk of that will come from Pat Freiermuth extension. Where that other $7 million plus comes from, will it be Najee Harris? Will they go out and trade for a wide receiver and then sign that wide receiver to an extension? We'll see. But That's my prediction, $20 to $25 million in additional cash being spent. And I'm interested to see how close I come to it, because year one of a year three cash spend period makes it extremely tough to throw that. I mean, you're basically blindfold me, gave me the rules for the game, but then spun me around, tell me to throw the dart. So I'm interested to see how close I come.
Pin the tail on the cash spending amount in year one. It doesn't roll off the tongue as well as donkey, but we'll see. And it's a good measuring stick and yardstick by you. And if they were to trade for a receiver, could it be Brandon Aiyuk? If we haven't had enough Brandon Aiyuk talk already, we'll add on just briefly a little bit more. According to Ryan Clark on NFL Live Monday, Aiyuk was meeting with the 49ers yesterday. That's his camp meeting with Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, and San Francisco. Not entirely sure the exact nature of the conversation. Obviously, contract related. Don't know what progress was being made, if any, there. I think Adam Schefter reporting that the Commanders had trade talks with the Niners. Of course, Commanders rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels is good friends with Aiyuk. They played at Arizona State together in Daniels' freshman season. So really still no true movement, but the two sides are talking. Where those talks go, I have no idea.
Do you think wherever Brandon Aiyuk starts the 2024 season, do you think he does so with a average yearly value of $30 million or more?
Well, I think he'll do it on a new deal. I don't think he's going to go into the year without a long-term extension. What that exact figure is, I'll say it'll at least surpass Jalen Waddle, who I think came in at $28 million. Will it get to 30? I can't say for sure. I think it'll be at least 28 and change.
I am thinking along your lines that I'm not so sure he cracks the 30 million number. I think it's probably anywhere from what did Joe Corey put out there from what the inflation value of the deal Deebo Samuel side. I think he said he related it to 28.5 million or right around in there in today's money. So I think it could wind up being somewhere close to 27.5 to 29 million. I guess what I'm getting at here is I think we're starting to see some come to Jesus moments here with Aiyuk, maybe getting a realization that he might not get that 30 million number.
I mean, the reporting is he wants 30. He wants a St. Brown deal. The Niners are at 26, so your middle ground's 28. I think you get him past what Waddle got and makes him number 7 highest paid receiver in football, whatever that figure is, and that's how you get the deal done. So that's my thought. But again, we're just all along for the ride right now.
Right. We just continue to watch this. Aiyuk is supposed to be on the Ryan Clark podcast, right?
Yeah, he's on the Pivot. I guess today. I don't know the exact details on that. That's not live or anything. It's pre-recorded, so that it'll premiere at some point. We should check that, and I'm sure it'll be talked about endlessly. I mentioned this on the live stream on Monday yesterday, Dave, that if an extension happens with Aiyuk in San Francisco, then the whole trade conversation shifts entirely from Aiyuk, of course, to Deebo Samuel. And does Deebo get moved before week 1? I don't know what the compelling reason for the Niners to do that would be as they make their Super Bowl run, but that's where the conversation will go. And we mentioned this a couple weeks ago when reportedly Aiyuk thought an extension could get done with the Niners right before the draft or right around draft time. And if Pittsburgh was reportedly close to a deal with the San Francisco wide receiver at that time, which was what Michael Lombardi had said, if Aiyuk thought he was getting extended with the Niners, then he was going to stay there, which leaves Deebo Samuel as the guy Pittsburgh may have been trading for. So all of that is to say that as much focus as we've had on Aiyuk and will continue until the deal is done with San Francisco, if that occurs, I don't want to forget about Deebo Samuel as well in this conversation.
Yeah, I think I wrote a couple of weeks ago that, as this thing has moved on, that it seems like if the Steelers were to land either one of those 49ers wide receivers at this point, Deebo might make the most sense overall. But even so, I think I've gotten to the point where don't tell me about the labor pains. Just show me the baby at this point when it comes to all these wide receivers. Cortland Sutton in Denver. Obviously both the 49ers wide receivers. Obviously, you don't have that third wide receiver to talk about anymore after he signed his deal. Who was that? Jenkins, right?
Jenkins?
Jawan
Jennings.
Jennings.
Okay.
Yeah, after he signed his deal, because we talked about him early on in the offseason and all like that. So, look, I'll be surprised if anything happens with the Steelers with one of those big guy names. And if it does end up happening, as I stated at this point, it feels like if it's a San Francisco wide receiver, it might actually end up being Deebo Samuel. And if it's not one of those San Francisco guys, I think the easiest dot connect would be Cortland Sutton with Denver, but I don't think they're willing to do anything with him, if at all, until way closer to the start of the regular season.
Yeah, this stuff will still take time. As you pointed out, June trades are uncommon. I imagine early July trades are also uncommon. Probably get in the camp, evaluate guys, make sure teams are healthy, guys are good. The Niners have some young guys to evaluate, and Pearsall and Cowing, their draft picks. They probably want to take a good look at those guys in competitive settings, and before they make really any decisions on potentially trading somebody away. Dave, one former Pittsburgh Steelers receiver who's trying to make a comeback in the NFL. Forgot to mention this on Friday's show, so that's my bad. But James Washington, who had missed all of 2023 rehabbing from a foot injury that he suffered, I think, in 2022. And I think he was in camps last year, but he never played a regular season down. But he's now fully healthy, he says, and training hard, looking for an NFL comeback. Do you have any interest in bringing in James Washington for a part 2 in Pittsburgh?
No, nada, zero, nothing, no, no.
Would you be a bit more clear about that? Yeah, I had briefly considered it because he is a little more of that vertical threat, potential outside guy. But then I had the thought of the next receiver move Pittsburgh makes should be the needle mover, like the move to finalize and solidify this group, not these kind of little add-ons that are that Scotty Miller types, the Quez Watkins, that make you maybe a little bit better and you're kind of in the mix, but just not more, I don't mean to be so negative here, but not more mud on the wall. Make the big move if you're going to make a move at that position.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a needle mover. I mean, look, would it kill you to bring the guy in and have him in camp? No, absolutely not. I mean, look, I think James Washington is a good person, and, big old hands on that guy there. But I think the NFL ship has sailed on him altogether. I don't see the value that he brings. Never been a huge special teams guy on top of it. So you kind of just spinning your wheels in with that side of him as well there. So, yeah, I mean, I root for him. I hope he lands somewhere. I hope he gets a shot, but as far as Pittsburgh goes, nah.
To talk about current Steelers, I thought the Athletic's Mark Cabali in his mailbag had an interesting comment. And sometimes these guys just pop these things up and you're not quite sure, is this informed speculation, reporting, or is this just educated guesses? But Cabali believes and had written in a mailbag that Broderick Jones will be at left tackle while Dan Moore Jr. and Troy Fautanu will compete at right tackle in training camp. There's some logic to it. I know in OTAs it seemed like Moore was basically left tackle, Fautanu right tackle, and Jones was flip-flopping between both sides, left and right side. So we'll see how things shake up for camp, if it'll be different as Cabali is outlining here. But if it truly is a Dan Moore versus Troy Fautanu battle at right tackle, then I'm very confident Fautanu is going to win that, because Dan Moore has talked about how uncomfortable he is playing right tackle. He, of course, will have to flip. I know Fautanu is flipping as well, but he's got a head start on it and hasn't played the position as much as Dan Moore, and so it's probably a little easier transition for him to make there. So that's what he said. We'll see. But if so, that would tell me that your week 1 starters most likely will be Broderick Jones on the left side and Troy Fautanu on the right side.
This is the bad part about being in the June blues right now. We've got 30 days to go before Alex Kozora is out there observing the first practice. And now we're going to go over 30 days of he said, she said, this guy's going to be week 1, day 1. Look, it all sounds great. Sign me up. Sign me up. Sign me up to put Broderick Jones at left tackle day 1 of training camp, and and Fautanu, Dan Moore battling for that right tackle spot. And I'm with you. I mean, if that ends up being what transpires here, I'm all in on Fautanu winning that. and it would make the fan base happy if that's what happens as well, too. I am. And there's not many people listening to this that probably aren't rooting for a week 1 Atlanta game that features Broderick Jones at left tackle and Troy Fautanu at right tackle. Probably not many people listening to this that rooting for other than that. But we got to get to at least day 1 of training camp to see which way this thing gets started.
Sure, and I don't know how they're going to start off day 1, if they're going to do the veteran nod, which is what they typically do. I mean, they're going to flip-flop and maybe mix and match. So certainly one of the top things we'll be watching for, especially those first couple days when they're not in pads and it's more still a little OTA feel because it's not full contact. You're not ramping things up totally. It's the ramp-up period where you're in helmets and shorts, and that'll really give us time to take a look at how they're potentially mixing and matching a couple of these linemen.
Agreed.
All right, Dave, I had an article yesterday.
Real quick, going back to the cash spend real quick. Do you think this team will spend another $20 million in cash at least moving forward from right now in additional cash expenditures?
I didn't have a number on it, but I expected some extensions to occur, which will increase the cash amount being spent. I expect I think you're a bit more confident than I am, but I think more likely than not that Freiermuth will get an extension. I've been on record saying I think they will trade for a receiver in some capacity. I don't know who that's going to be. I don't know what that dollar amount's going to be, but they will add a receiver of some sort to hopefully start for them in week 1. Hayward, I think, will get that extension, but it may be the no new money thing you talked about. But short answer, yeah, I think they're going to spend a fair amount more cash from now until week 1.
Okay. All right. Take us where you will.
I had an article on Monday. It's been a study I've been reviewing for a couple of years now. This is the 3rd season of coaching staff sizes and where does Pittsburgh fall in. And they've been near the bottom the previous 2 years. But in 2024, Pittsburgh, they officially has the smallest coaching staff in the NFL at 19 coaches right now. That's 10 on offense, 7 on defense, 1 on special teams. And then, of course, head coach Mike Tomlin to give you your 19. No other team in the NFL has fewer than 21 total coaches. The Miami Dolphins and Las Vegas Raiders lead the NFL with 27 total coaches on staff. That does not include analysts and some of those more team operations positions. So the takeaway and the question is, does it matter? Does it matter that Pittsburgh has the smallest coaching staff in football? Dave, does this matter to you?
No, but it's a talking point overall. And I appreciate the research and the deep dive it took for you to put that together there. This is nothing new when it comes to the Steelers, right? Smaller coaching staffs. Would you like to? Is more just is more overkill? Is there too many bosses, not enough kind of employees if you get into that situation there? I don't know. I think as many brilliant, experienced minds that you can get around a team, the better. But in the grand scheme of things, where have some of these other teams ranked near the bottom recently won Super Bowls?
Last year, I had in the article I had written that San Francisco had an above average number of, I think the Niners had an above average number of coaches and the Chiefs had a below average number of coaches, but by slight amounts. And so what I found so far in the sample size, that data is pretty limited, is I'm not seeing a big correlation between a larger coaching staff is creating more success. I'd have to do more research into it and look at some of the larger kind of data sets, but to me, I'm not really seeing that correlation. And so it may not, it's quality over quantity may still be more the factor. And of course, Pittsburgh has a much different looking coaching staff, but the number in terms of just number of people is about the same as last year. So just a thought, and had some different trend lines on looking at the Patriots changing their model under Bill Belichick. They were always the team that had the fewest coaches in football, right below Pittsburgh. And now Gerard Mayo has added, I think, 7 new hires compared to where the coaching staff was a season ago. So you see a big change there. I think generally you're seeing younger coaches have larger coaching staffs, guys like McDaniel in Miami, Antonio Pearson with the Raiders and his new coaching staff. They're the largest in football. And generally, some of the more veteran, older head coaches have smaller coaching staffs. I think that is one interesting trend line to watch.
All right. Yeah, I guess that would be the overarching question there is, does it matter when it comes to correlation to success or not?
Yeah.
And,
so that's
there's only one Super Bowl winner every year, right?
Sure. And so the sample size is the data is still pretty small overall, but that's the data. Take it for whatever it's worth. I don't use it as a critique of the team, but I use it as information gathering and to watch trends for Pittsburgh and for the NFL.
Okay.
All right, Dave, I think the last thing we'll talk about before we get to reader emails is your 90 and 30 series. We went through the first 2 groups on the Friday show, and so we'll kind of go through all the ones you've been doing since, starting with Kalen Barnes, Tyler Beach, and Keanu Ben. So I'll let you start things off here with cornerback Kalen Barnes.
Yeah, and before we go that, I wanted to today is a special day, and I didn't want to just save this for the end of the show for some, a lot of people might click out before they get to there. So I kind of wanted to interrupt the show and something that's important for not only Steelers Depot as a whole, but really one of our full-time guys as well, too. Our very own Scott Brown, who's been full-time editor on the site for, what are we going on now? Almost getting close to, a year and a half, 2 years now? Alex?
I'd have to double check, but it's been quite some time with Scott.
And if people recognize the name, Scott Brown was a longtime beat writer for the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, went on to ESPN and did work as a Steelers beat writer there. He's authored several books, over the years as well, too. Well, he's got a new book dropping now, and it's called Legendary. And he wrote this in collaboration with George Von Benko. And what it is they collaborated with the great Dick LeBeau. And what this book is it's about the legendary Steelers and legendary and dominant 2008 Steelers defensive unit. Obviously one of the most feared and successful in modern NFL landscape there. So this is a book really heavily with heavy interviews and influence from Dick LeBeau. They've spent a lot of time with Dick LeBeau, going over that 2008 defense and a lot of great quotes in here. And this is a new book out. You should be able to buy it starting now from our very own Scott Brown. It is from Triumph Books. People starting today can get 30% off the purchase at triumphbooks.com. So triumphbooks.com/legendary is the way you find it on their website there. And if you enter in code STEEL30, that's STEEL 30, all one word, as the promo code, you will get 30% off of that purchase there. And that's a way you can not only get a good summer read here to close things out this offseason here, but support our very own Scott Brown as well, too. So, this is a big day. We're going to be promoting the snot out of this thing for Scott on social media, in our email, subscribers and all like that. You'll see it on, we'll have another interview coming up with Dick LeBeau. We'll have Scott Brown on the podcast at some point, again, to talk about the book as well, too. But today is kind of officially the kickoff of the book, promoting it today. So I just wanted to make sure we got that out there today.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we're able to mention that, and we'll continue to mention that because it's a huge moment for Scott Brown in association with us. But we want to put the focus on Scott, the book, of course, Coach LeBeau, and the stories that he's able to tell. And so happy that this is happening, to be able to tell those stories in one place and always have that memory and to have those quotes and have those stories for 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now. That's the goal. So be on the lookout for that. We encourage you guys to pick up a copy, to do the pre-orders, because I promise you it'll be well worth the read.
I agree as well too. I can't wait to get my hands on our copies, which should be coming pretty soon here. All right, you asked about. Let's go a little bit further in the 90 and 30 series of mine. The next three names I don't think that we've covered are, as you stated, Kalen Barnes, Tyler Beach, and Keanu Benton. Let's start at the bottom of the list. The most notable name of those three names right there, Keanu Benton. When you talk about players that especially young players on this roster outside of, let's say, even the rookie class this year, that you're most excited to see, most excited about the jumps that they can make in their second NFL season, Keanu Benton's got to be, him and Joey Porter Jr. really got to be at the top of that list. Obviously, Benton, second round pick, 2024, out of Wisconsin. I don't think he disappointed much, if any at all, throughout his rookie season. Now with him having a full season underneath his belt, with him being able to train like a normal NFL player would train getting ready for the season, with the amount of snaps and the different things that he was able to see, and just a little intricacies that we saw last year with Keanu Benton. Man, this guy could take a huge jump in 2024. I think it really should be expected. I think just overall, when it comes to a look ahead and outlook for Keanu Benton in 2024, is how much can we get this kid on the field in certain sub-package situations. I think you'll see an increase of that. We need to see an increase in that. Man, let this guy let this guy pin his ears back in certain situations where all he has to do is beat the guard ahead of him. I think that's a very important thing for seeing his production go up. And I think you just overall just need to see a more consistent defensive player with him. And I'm expecting us to get that jump in consistency with him. I think, and Carl Dunbar mentioned this at the end of mandatory minicamp when talking about Keanu Benton. This kid left a lot of sacks on the field last season. What did Dunbar say? 7? Was it 7? I think they counted when it comes to Keanu Benton and the amount that he left on the field. If he's, look, obviously these things are going to be random at times. You got Watt and Highsmith coming off the edge, but there's going to be a fair number of sacks, I think, for Benton to make in 2024. I personally think that you could see this number exceed 5 in 2024, and it might, if the right circumstances happen, he could probably press double digits.
Oh, I mean, sign me up for that for sure, depending on the snap count. But yeah, I mean, he, according to our charting, he tied for the D-line lead with 16 pressures last year, but only had 1 sack. I think that came early in the year against the Raiders on Jimmy Garoppolo. And so, yeah, there was a lot of meat left on that bone, to use the Mike Tomlin phrase. And also just the fact is, he's going to start day one. Remember, he didn't start last year. I think people kind of forget that. Montravius Adams was starting over him until he got hurt in that Tennessee game midway through, and then Benton closed the season out. And so he'll be a day one starter and hopefully play more, as you said, in sub packages. There were points last year where they just weren't playing him enough overall. I mean, I'm looking at the data now. I know he's the 3-4 nose tackle, and so you're never going to play quite as much as Hayward or Ogunjobi, but only 4 games last year did Benton play more than half the defensive snaps. That's got to change when you come from your 3-4 front, which is still being used about a third of the time. And then, of course, your sub-package rotation. Listen, if Larry Ogunjobi is not getting the job done, then you got to start playing Benton basically over him in sub-packages and having Benton treated as not only your starter in base, but a starter in nickel if Ogunjobi is not producing, because he has not produced that well as a pass rusher in the 2 years he's been with Pittsburgh. So that those are things on the table. But yeah, I think Benton could have a really big year number 2.
All right. Definitely looking forward to the 2024 season when it comes to him. Moving backwards, still another Wisconsin product. Tyler Beach was signed to a reserve futures contract back in January. Originally entered the NFL with the Houston Texans in 2023 as an undrafted free agent. Failed to stick with them after the preseason ended. He also, I think, failed to latch on to a practice squad in 2023. This is a guy that last season, I think, with the Texans played both tackle spots in the preseason, along with, in addition to right guard. He mainly logged snaps at both tackle spots in college, but did see some limited playing time at both guard spots. So you've got a very versatile guy. Not only that, Beach, I went back and checked, he logged nearly 2,000 total offensive snaps at Wisconsin over the course of 5 seasons. So you've got a guy that played a lot of snaps in college at multiple spots. Now, realistically, this guy's got his work cut out for him during the summer. First and foremost, you just got to stay healthy and on the roster, because we've seen short lines, guys at back of the lines. Sometimes he's going to need help at other position groups, maybe staying healthy as well. Because if you got long lines at one position, if another line in another position gets short, it might cost you your job, and you did nothing wrong. It just ends up a numbers game there. I think first and foremost, the Beach has to do his part by hopefully staying healthy throughout the summer and making it through obviously training camp and the preseason. I think when you get into these preseason games, it will be interesting to see how much position flexibility. Is he a guy that they move around to 4 spots even at some point during these preseason games? At the very least, is he one that plays both tackle spots and maybe one guard spot? I think that would bode well for him to show that position flexibility. Overall, is he going to make the 53-man roster? Probably not. But he is a guy that, if he can stay healthy, could at least make a case to be a practice squad guy.
Versatility is definitely going to be his calling card, which is a useful tool to have to stick around and be on the practice squad. I think back to, remember John LeGlue a couple years ago? He was a guy that was versatile and increased his versatility, even became I think center on the side and long snapper on the side, just doing whatever he could. And he stuck around and became a left guard that started a handful of games for Pittsburgh when injuries did strike. And so, yeah, Beach has played basically everything, even some tight end tackle eligible at Wisconsin. As you said, a ton of snaps there. And so that's going to be his mission, is showing he can play multiple spots to secure a practice squad spot and hang around. That'll be his path to stay.
I agree. All right. Let's see. Another name we have on this set of 3 is Kalen Barnes, former 7th round selection of the Panthers in 2022. He was signed to a reserve futures contract in January. Previously had been with the Steelers at start of the 2023 season as a member of the team's practice squad. He's bounced around to several teams in the NFL, logged playing time in just 2 games and a total of 9 special team snaps. Those came in 2022 with the Vikings. Played his college ball at Baylor, mainly played outside cornerback after switching from wide receiver in college before the 2018 season. Fast. I think that's one of the things that we talked about, or wrote about right after he had inked on to the practice squad early last season. What was it? 4.23 second 40-yard dash at the 2022 combine there. Not much has really come out of him really since then. A long shot to make the 53-man roster this summer. He'll need to show somebody something, I think, on special teams throughout the summer to help his cause, even if that cause is a practice squad position to start the 2024 season there. But this is a guy that wants, much like Beach, he better stay healthy all the summer. He better show up during the preseason and make a few plays, maybe on defense, and more importantly, better show that he can play some special teams.
Yeah, speed is his calling card. He ran, what, I think 4.23 at the combine. I mean, one of the fastest 40s ever, but speed alone is not going to cut it in the NFL. Can you show something on special teams, be a good tackler? If you're going to be on special teams, you got to be physical, you got to be smart, you got to be a good tackler, you got to be able to work your hands well. So that's going to be the things that Barnes will have to look for and maximize his reps. It's unlikely he'll play a lot, in the preseason, in training camp. He'll get maybe 7-10 reps per day. Got to maximize those opportunities.
Okay, the next three in the series, we'll cover three more, and then we'll discuss more in future shows here. Beanie Bishop Jr., Chris Boswell, Marquez Callaway. Let's get the easy one out of the way with Chris Boswell. I think the biggest thing with Chris Boswell is, after him not having a particularly great showing in 2022, how much of that maybe was related to that, what was it, groin injury, I think, that he had during that season. He wasn't the same Chris Boswell in 2022. There was a lot of question about would he be able to rebound from that in 2023. He did. Plain and simple, he was the Chris Boswell that you expected to have the season previously. What did he do? 30 of 32 field goal attempts in 2023. 29 of his 30 extra point tries he made. 6 of 7 attempts, 50 yards or greater. I mean, for old man at 32, put together a great 2023 season. I think he had a career best 63.6 yards per kickoff average in 2023 on 76 total kickoffs. 55 of those resulted in touchbacks. I mean, long story short, he rebounded from his 2022 season. He'll obviously be the Steelers kicker in 2024, barring something totally unexpected. That unexpected would probably be injury or something related to that. He does have a new holder in 2024 in new punter Cameron Johnston, but you would think that those two have more than enough time to sync up with each other. And I think really the only other interesting aspect when it comes to Chris Boswell in 2024 is the kickoff rule and how will that impact what he's asked to do. Obviously, you don't want Boswell making tackles out there, not that he's not willing to do those kind of things, but how will the whole kickoff rule come into play? Might you see a position player out there? Who knows how this thing's going to go. But to me, the biggest question when it comes to Boswell in 2024 really is what's he asked to do differently on new kickoff rule?
Sure, that'll be the biggest change. I know Danny Smith had said that Boz is all in on the new kickoff rules, which would suggest Pittsburgh does not have plans to use a position player. I don't know who that would even be if they would even attempt that, but it'll probably be Boz handling that. But in terms of the nature of the kickoffs, as Danny Smith said, hang times don't matter anymore. Will they try more line drives, some more different type of things, squib kicks, potentially? We'll just have to wait and see on all of that. What if could you do a squib kick? Because the line can move once the ball hits the ground, correct?
Man, I haven't gone as deep into this thing as you have.
I'm pretty sure.
A lot more about the new kickoff rule than I do.
All the coverage return guys can't move until the ball is caught or it hits the ground. What if you kicked it like 20 yards because the kicker's way behind everybody else, kicked it 20 yards, the ball bounces? Is that a live ball? I mean, it can't be, but I wonder. I know onside kicks aren't allowed unless it's fourth quarter, you declare. I'm not talking about onside kicks. I'm talking about, if you just kind of squibbed it 25 yards and the ball is bouncing by the time it even reaches the coverage team at the 40-yard line, the opposing 40-yard line. I wonder how that'll work. So it's a whole Brave New World type of thing, but Boz is excellent. 50 yards. He's the best 50-yard plus kicker in Pittsburgh Steelers history. Not even close on that. Probably a little bit easier to kick these days from that distance than it used to be with some of the stadium changes, but still, he's been just money overall. And mentally tough too, and bouncing back from injuries and tough years is a real testament because kickers can be on their own head and their own worst enemy, and so he's always bounced back.
And I wonder to some degree, and I think who did we mention? Gerard Mayo talked about this recently, new Patriots head coach. Are we going to get in a situation where teams are going to say, you know what, the best thing is just to kick this thing and get it out of the back of the end zone and it be a touchback. And if indeed that's the way that winds up being, as this thing progresses the best way, I mean, you got a guy in Boswell that still proved that he what I say, 55 of his kickoffs resulted in touchbacks last season, so he can still get it there.
Yeah, and I don't know how many of those were fair caught. I mean, there were touchbacks were extremely high last year because of the rule changes. But as you said, the kickoff average 63 yards per kickoff was a career high. So, I mean, he's got the leg strength. Yeah, I'm still of the belief that I think you won't see as many crazy returns and dramatic changes in terms of yardage gain than people are expecting, but it'll be different and something to certainly watch to see how teams adjust. But I think Boz will be just fine.
All right, another name on this set of three, Marquez Callaway. They signed him. He's a former undrafted free agent out of Tennessee in 2020. They signed him to a reserve futures contract in January. Started his NFL career with New Orleans. Has since been on the rosters of the Broncos and the Raiders. He landed back with the Saints in 2023 as a practice squad player. I think he appeared in like 3 games with the Saints in 2023, but he did not register any stats. He only played 28 offensive plays. I think he was on the field for last season in those games with the Saints. Since entering the NFL, he has, however, played in 45 regular season games, 17 total starts, has 83 career receptions. He's made some big plays on the field before, over 1,000 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns in the NFL. He's also returned 14 punts and I think 4 kickoffs in the NFL. Has just 111 special team snaps to his credit. Most of his snaps, I think, has come as an outside wide receiver, but he has played some in the slot since entering the NFL. We've talked about him previously on this podcast this summer, not only right after he was signed to reserve futures deal. I think you had that kind of that series of kind of, what would you call that series that he was part of?
I'm trying to think about what you're referring to.
The reserve, the future.
Oh, just the future. Oh, yeah. Just a general future report. Yeah. Yep.
And we've talked about him previously on this podcast, so I don't want to spend a lot of time. He is a bit of a dark horse here, especially when you look at the wide receiver depth chart as is. At least you've got another guy beyond Van Jefferson, beyond Quez Watkins, beyond Scotty Miller, that does have NFL experience here. And he's also got some experience a little bit with Zach Azzani, the Steelers' new wide receiver coach, because Azzani recruited Callaway at Tennessee in 2016. All that familiarity, though, does not guarantee Callaway a roster spot. He has made some plays in the NFL over time here, although he has lacked consistency in his play. I think he's going to have to. One thing that would behoove him during the summer here is to work on his special teams. Can he make himself a guy that Danny Smith potentially pounds the table for at some point? Overall, I think when it's all said and done, though, barring injuries or anything like that, Callaway's a long shot to make the Steelers' 53-man roster out of training camp this year. And I think more realistically, when it comes to Callaway's, he's going to be battling for a practice squad spot once we get into the deep summer.
Yeah, if he could recapture that magic he had early in his career in 2020, there's a little something there from a height, weight, speed, vertical threat standpoint. My comp to him, funny enough, when I wrote the report on him coming out of Tennessee, was James Washington, kind of that type of guy. But in that muddied room, and his career's fallen off. It's harder to see that path. Not impossible, but a guy that might make some plays against some backups in camp and might flash a little bit. So don't want to completely discount him, but it's still a tough path.
All right. The first name that was on this 3 that we've kind of worked backwards to here is Beanie Bishop Jr., the undrafted free agent out of West Virginia via Minnesota and Western Kentucky. Look, we only got 5 true undrafted free agents that this team signed this year. But even if this list had probably been 10, overall. I think Beanie Bishop would probably be the one that we would have been talking the most about overall. I think it was a good, undrafted free agent signing by them, $25,000 signing bonus, bit undersized at 5'9", 1/8 inch. But his college tape, I think when you dive deep into it, you see a guy that plays bigger than 5'9" and 1/8. He registered 67 total tackles last season to go along with them, 20 passes defense, 4 interceptions in his 5 college seasons. Totaled 79 tackles, I think, overall, 1 sack, 3 interceptions in the previous 4 before, or in his 5 previous college seasons, 4 of which came at Western Kentucky, were those numbers that I just rattled off there. 79 tackles, 1 sack, 3 interceptions, 10 passes defense, and a forced fumble. Mostly played outside cornerback through his college career, but he did log several snaps in the slot. Made quite a bit of special teams play, or did play on special teams quite a bit during his college career. He was asked to return some punts and kickoffs during that span. Look, long story short on Beanie Bishop is, I think the Steelers are probably going to look at him mostly as a slot guy moving forward in their defense. Obviously, the outlook on him was a little bit better as far as roster chances before Cameron Sutton showed up, but there's a lot of uncertainty as far as Cameron Sutton and NFL discipline and what is that going to translate into. I think regardless here, when you get to training camp opening, this is a guy that I'm going to be asking you about quite a bit throughout the training camp practices here in Beanie Bishop. I still sort of like his chances to make the 53-man roster overall. That said, I don't think it would be a huge shock if he didn't. I think he could be a guy that potentially winds up at least to start the season on the practice squad. But he does give you an undersized guy, more in the mold of a Mike Hilton-esque type player. I know he's talked about watching a lot of Mike Hilton film and all like that, but you get Mike Hilton vibes on him, and I just think this is a guy that's going to be thrown in the mix at slot during training camp.
Sure, there's a healthy vibe on Beanie Bishop right now, and I'm excited about him. He was definitely the most talented and best undrafted free agent, or that granted very small class of guys they brought in, one of the 5. I don't want to set expectations too high because he still was undrafted and there's still some size concerns. And remember Shakir Brown a couple of years ago from Michigan State, their cornerback that had kind of similar buzz. He was a feisty, like true nickel type with the Spartans, and he didn't work out in Pittsburgh. These guys will still miss, and so I don't want to assume he's going to make the team or be this high impact player. But I'm excited. All-American last year, good athlete, physical, ball skills. And with Cam Sutton, even though he's in the picture right now, will he be eligible week 1? Good chance he won't be, which then reopens that slot cornerback spot to be wide open. So Bishop will have to compete, and he's going to make some more veteran plays because there are some vets in there like Josiah Scott he's going to compete with, and Cam Sutton will get the reps in training camp. So Bishop will still have to prove himself, earn his spot. In my deconstructing the roster series, maybe a spoiler alert here, I gave Bishop a 40% chance to make the 53. Is that too high, too low, or just about right?
No, I think that's plausible, especially look, we don't know what's going to happen with Sutton to start the season,
Yeah, that really muddies. Because would Sutton have to make the roster first, or could he go immediately to the reserve suspended? He would just go immediately to the reserve suspended list if he were to be suspended. But that assumes that the NFL make that decision before that time, and they can make it 2 days before the season begins. It's a whole up in the air kind of situation.
I would like to think that we'll have some finality on Cameron Sutton by the end of the preseason. I would hope, but there's no guarantee in that. But it does kind of muddy the waters a little bit when it comes to a guy like Beanie Bishop. Look here, the 2 things I think that stuck out the most to me about Beanie Bishop and his tape was his intuition in coverage and being able to read things and get himself to a correct spot to make a potential play on the football, whether it be a pass breakup or an interception or something along those lines. And the other thing, man, just for a guy at 5'9", 1/8, man, he really showed some physicality, willing to hit wide receivers, ball carriers of any way, shape, or form. Those are the two things that really stuck out. If you're going to be an undersized guy like him, you better have two of those qualities like that. So it's easy to pick him out of the five guys, undrafted free agents this team signed this offseason to be the most excited about. And once again, I'm going to be asking you a lot about Beanie Bishop Jr. once training camp gets underway.
You and many others, I imagine. So certainly one guy to watch for.
All right.
All right, Dave. Anything else? If not, we can close out today's show and get to some reader emails.
Absolutely, we can. And I think we've got a few of them in here. If I can get this sorted real quick here.
And we'll be back on Friday, of course. Have Terrible Takes. We had the live stream, Dave and I, yesterday. So if you want to go back and listen to that, had a good turnout, a couple of great questions. And so can revisit that to pass the time.
All right. Jay in Clarion writes in, I know all this speculation about the Steelers adding a wide receiver has been done to death, but I had a new thought today with some of the recent rumors around the league. He says, I put new in quotes because this was touched on months ago. But with the new rumors about Aiyuk potentially being traded to the Washington Commanders, I couldn't help but wonder if that might increase the odds that the Steelers might trade for a guy like Dotson or Terry McLaurin. I'm not sure what the cap implications might be with these potential moves for either team, blah, blah, blah. That's making the Commanders less likely to move said players. But if you're adding and then playing a guy like Aiyuk, you might need to make some corresponding moves to make the math add up. He says, I still think adding Cortland Sutton is the most likely move, but just wanted to hear your thoughts on some different names and their plausibility. Look, half of the people are like Jay that still are highly interested in watching this thing play out. Several others are probably like, come get me when the Steelers actually make a move. When it comes to that, let me pull up McLaurin's situation with Washington right now. He is scheduled to make $15.15 million base salary in 2024. He has already been paid some roster bonuses to go along with that, I think, this year. So that would have to be eaten by the Commanders. He is under contract for 2025. His contract voids after 2025. There, they would take a pretty significant dead money. I guess. Well, let's see. We're past June 1st, so some of that would transfer over into dead money into 2025 if they traded him at this point. From an economics standpoint, and that standpoint only, could the Steelers make this work? Say if Aiyuk went to the Commanders and the Commanders were looking to on the backside. How many times, though, do you see deals, though, or culmination of things like that? In comes one player post June 1st, out goes another guy at the same position to another team that also has a sizable. It's just, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. You just don't see that happen, especially post June 1st, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it's very rare. I mean, there's a bit of need for this to kind of become ripe to talk about. But if they were to trade for Aiyuk and pay him a bunch of money, McLaurin's going to want to get paid because he doesn't want to be so underpaid on his own team after trading for Aiyuk. So that may create conflict there. So maybe. I
think just in general, Jay, with the way that you have this laid out and looking at, McLaurin obviously being a more notable than Dotson is there. It seems mighty messy when it comes to McLaurin.
Well, Dotson, I think it makes sense. So the premise, if they did bring in Aiyuk, could they potentially move somebody out? I think they'd want to keep McLaurin if possible to give, Daniels weapons, and they're obviously making an aggressive move. Don't want to add somebody, then subtract somebody. But, I think Jahan Dotson, I liked him coming out of Penn State. He's on his rookie deal, so it's not like you really have to move him, but that's an interesting name to consider.
Yeah, with him, looking at his, he's a rookie. Obviously, yeah. I mean, $1.5 million base salary. I mean, you could obviously make that work with him. So, I mean, if you just wanted to, on such a cheap salary, why would you want to get him out of the room?
Yeah, that's a fair point. But if they just felt like they didn't need him or they got a good offer, maybe. But good question there. You said Jay from Clarion. Is that what he said?
Yeah, Jay Guilford from Jay and Clarion. Yeah.
My neck of the woods, or where I went to college. And so we'll get some Bob Subs, Jay, when I go up there next.
All right, Brett Nile back with us. Let's see. He says, you guys asked for a reaction to his proposed contract that I had for Najee. So here it goes. He says, let me first say that I did not think Najee was worth the fifth-year option, but I was surprised that they did not pick it up, he writes. My bias is that I would not pay Najee the roughly $7 million option, so I really don't like the idea of paying him nearly $10 million on a new contract. He says, just my opinion, I just don't think he's worth it. He's not an elite back. He did not transcend the running game, and his performance has only gotten better as his line has gotten better. If you can't make your line better than you're not a back worth paying, in his opinion. He says, as far as the structure and the length go that I had thrown out there in my projection, he says, I agree that that would be a Steeler contract. And if I was comfortable with the salary, that contract would make sense. So long story short, he's washed his hands with Najee. As far as he doesn't even think that they should have picked up his fifth-year option, yada, yada. He says, here's his real question. You have said many times that when you pick up an option or tag a guy, that it sets the floor for negotiation. You just admitted he's worth the tag amount. So why does declining the, I guess he's talking about worth the fifth-year option tag, I guess is what he's saying. So why does declining the option not set the ceiling? From the Steelers' perspective, the argument is if we thought you were worth more than $9 million, we would have just picked up the option. He says, I'm not saying Najee would sign an extension for less than $7 million, but if they were willing to go over $7 million, they made a mistake in not picking up the option and talk extension next year. All right. Something has gotten lost in translation with my whole thoughts on this Najee thing. And I think, either I have not conveyed that well enough or which probably not out of the realm here. My whole contention on this, my tinfoil hat kind of thoughts theory on this when it comes to Najee and the team even considering signing him to an extension moving forward, mostly revolves all around the precedent when it comes to the fifth-year option, and then picking that up and then signing a player with technically 2 years remaining on his contract, and then breaking precedent that way, and then setting yourself up for future precedent, not only with players 2 years out left on their deal, non-quarterbacks, but also future guys that maybe you would exercise the fifth-year option on, and then them expecting you to do a deal with them in that same offseason, as opposed to the way they did things with, let's say, more recently with Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt, where they picked up the fifth-year option and the deal didn't come until the final, once that fifth-year option year rolled around there. That's been the largest focus of mine when it comes to Najee Harris and them not picking up the fifth-year option. Look, Alex, did I not make that clear enough in here?
No, I think we discussed that was kind of the core of our conversation that we had last week.
I mean, that has been the crux of kind of what I've been thinking about should, and it's a big if this team winds up getting a deal done with Najee Harris moving forward here. Look, make no mistake about it here. The only way my theory does not look cockamamie out there, tinfoil hat too tight. The only way this thing makes sense whatsoever is what? The Steelers signed him to a deal between now and week one of the regular season. Anything else besides that being the end result makes all this theory of mine look ridiculous, lack of a better word. All right. Plain, even if they don't get Najee signed to an extension, but news comes out that they tried to negotiate, it still does not lend any credibility at all to my theory about the whole precedent, 5th-year option, 2 years out, yada yada. None of that saves grace, so to speak, with what I have just. And on top of it, though, I'm the only one that's discussed this side of things, right? And look, I mean, even coming out of the 5th-year option, we were not even that decision. We weren't even kind of discussing this kind of theory, because remember, I told us to take it back out of the box a couple of weeks ago, right? And look at that thing, and that's where I presented the whole precedent, 5th-year option, and all like that. But I just wanted to make it clear that my thoughts on this team may be getting a deal done with Najee moving forward after not picking up the 5th-year option was all centralized on the idea of precedent and nothing more than that.
Yeah, I get the reader's comment, generally speaking, about setting ceilings if you decline options, but Dave's point is about the precedent being the reason for that, so it wouldn't apply in this particular situation.
And look, there is, and there should be. I mean, Alex has pushed back on it himself with the notion of the precedent and not picking up the 5th-year option and then turning around and maybe doing a deal. If you're a betting person, you're probably betting that they're not getting a deal done with Najee Harris the rest of this summer. And not only that, you can make the very strong argument that the fact that they didn't pick up a measly $6.79 million 5th-year option for 2025 on Najee means that they don't even think he's worth that. Right?
Yeah, I mean, just a quick thought. If the reason they declined the option was the precedent issue, which I understand the point that you're making, shouldn't a deal almost be done by now? Because if you had the desire to extend Najee, but you knew this 5th-year option was going to create that precedent issue, you don't want to, as you said, decline the option, but still want Najee long-term and then negotiate and realize, we can't agree on terms and nothing happens. And you kind of screw yourself by declining the option on the guy that you wanted to keep around. So if you were going to do that, wouldn't you basically already had a deal set in place so you could decline the option and then like a week later just do the extension just to get everything done? Sure,
you would think there would probably been some research on both sides ahead of even the what was it, May 5th decision, right?
Yeah, because you're not going to just blindly say, we don't do precedent, let's decline it. We do want to keep Najee, but let's just hope we can figure out a deal. You probably want to make sure some progress is there, so you don't have that concern of declining the option on the guy that you want to keep and you can't get a deal done. And now he's a free agent after next year and you've kind of really screwed yourself.
Sure. I mean, that's as far as time frame goes and all like that, the actual decision, that's a plausible pushback for sure. So. But deals get done when deals get done, though, on top of it. And, there might still be some give and take within there. And, maybe wanting to see how the market shaked out with Ramondre Stevenson. It's going to be interesting to see what the Jaguars do with Travis Etienne too, as well. This is a guy that they did pick the 5th-year option up on, the Jaguars, and it would be the complete opposite. Of course, I don't know what their precedent is and all like that. When it comes to non-quarterbacks and 5th-year option, and that might not even be in play over there. But Travis Etienne's probably looking at that Ramondre Stevenson deal right now and saying, "Hey, you guys ain't going to see me do jack squat at training camp. I want a new deal. You got Trevor Lawrence done now. Look at the running back market. Look at what I've done. I want a new deal now." I tell you this, it would probably, if the Steelers are indeed considering trying to get a deal done with Najee Harris and thinking that there might be any chance of getting that done, I think I might want to beat the Jaguars and Etienne to the altar, sure. So to speak.
And Etienne's making less on his option than Najee is, you said, right?
On
6.1.
Yeah, I think his was a little bit lower there.
Yeah.
So but not by much, but I mean there is a little bit of difference there. But look, the whole crux of the latest kind of thing that I'm laying out there when it comes to Najee is about mostly around precedent. All right. Well, I mean, it's all about precedent. And once again, a lot of you will be happy if no extension gets worked out for Najee, and my tinfoil hat kind of look at this thing goes by the wayside. Because the only way that my theory doesn't look cockamamie is if they sign him to a deal for more than, and it would have to be more than what the 5th-year option amount was as well, too.
Sure. But that feels like a given. If an extension did occur, very unlikely it would come under that, even though the history is on the 2 deals we've seen a 5th-year options being declined and extensions occurring, they've come under that option, but there's no chance that Najee's going to take less than that option amount on a long-term deal.
Now, however, comma.
Oh God, more commas.
If they get a deal done with Najee and it's, $9 million or more new money average, then you're going to have to really look hard and long at that theory that I laid out there.
Sure. No, you will. And you still feel like it's going to happen. Not that you're guaranteeing it, but your feeling is that it will happen.
By the day, I get more of a gut feeling sense that it's super plausible when it comes to that. Look, and I laid this out in the post yesterday. If you look at Najee's current placement on the Steelers when it comes to APY, average per year, he ranks 17th overall right now on this team. He is 2 spots behind Troy Fautanu, who has not even played down in the NFL. Now, obviously, it's been a couple years since Najee signed his rookie contract. I mean, it's not Troy Fautanu's fault that the slotting is and escalates related to the cap, yada, yada. But he is still behind a guy that's not played a single snap that's probably going to be blocking a lot for him in 2024. He is 3 spots behind Nate Herbig on this roster right now. He's just slightly, I think he's 1 spot ahead Miles Killebrew as far as APY. This is something I put in my post yesterday here. If Najee Harris gets to the start of the 2024 season and he does not have a new contract in place, that's going to be one unhappy guy right there. And deservedly so, in my opinion.
Sure. I mean, he's underpaid to be the starting running back of the Pittsburgh Steelers and assume the role that he assumes, but that's the rookie contract and the slotting, and that's how the CBA, functioned back in 2 CBAs ago. And Pittsburgh has the leverage to sit there and say, yeah, you want more money, sure, but we don't have to give it to you. So deal with it.
And I get the whole, just because the New England Patriots are jumping off the bridge, does that mean the Steelers should jump off the bridge too? In other words, yeah, we get it. They paid Stevenson, but they probably shouldn't have paid him that kind of money. That doesn't mean the Steelers have to pay Najee that kind of money. But within all that, the market value is the market value. And even on a deal at $9.5 million new money average, that's still half of what, and look, I made this clear in the post. I'm not, no way, shape, or form going to compare Najee Harris to Christian McCaffrey. All right. Christian McCaffrey is the highest paid NFL running back in the league for a reason right now. But is Najee at least worth half that money?
Yeah, he probably is. I mean, you can certainly say that Harris is underpaid as the Steelers starting running back, and you can debate the number exactly, but there's a raise that in theory should be in order, but all that sounds good on paper, but it still does not compel Pittsburgh. And I know that you know this, but it does not compel Pittsburgh to do a new deal.
Maybe Brett Niles just like 4 episodes behind. Obviously he got up to the point where we're asking people's opinion on Najee and extension and all like that. But my theory on this whole thing with Najee is not about the negotiating floor and the option and all like that. The theory that I have in line should, it's a big super if at this point they get a deal done with Najee, it's more along the lines of the precedent precedent leading up to it, and the whole fifth-year option decision and moving forward and all like that. It's mainly around precedent and not about negotiating off of fifth-year option amounts and all like that. I guess I apologize, Alex, because I evidently screwed this up pretty bad if we got people, misinterpreting kind of what I said.
I mean, I understood his larger point, and you would say removing the precedent situation, that in general situations, if you decline the fifth-year option, that would imply a team would not want to pay more than that on a long-term deal. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, well, at least you're setting the floor of what the value is. Had they picked up the fifth-year option for 2025 on Najee, you're at least telling him at that point, hey, we think you're worth $6.79 million starting next year.
Mm-hmm. Right. And by proxy, if you decline the option, again, just speaking big picture generally, that says that we don't think you're not worth more than what the option is.
Right. It's easy for anybody to look at this situation right now on the heels of them not picking up that fifth-year option and saying, damn, they don't even think he's worth $6.79 million next year to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let alone this year.
So, yeah, I understand the question and the point, and that's probably accurate in a lot of cases. But as Dave said, he's got the carve out to why this situation might be uniquely different.
All right, don't let this thing end up with Najee getting an extension.
we will hear about it. That is for sure. The beat writers seem pretty split on that. It's pretty interesting. I've seen beat writers, some of them say, yeah, they're not giving up on him. Others say that, don't think he's going to resign. So we'll be very telling. Yeah,
but none of them are really. The only reason they're giving on the other side of potentially don't give up on an extension with him is probably because of things that Omar Khan said last week in his interview, right?
Well, I think even Jared Dulac, shortly after the option was declined, had said some comment about they still value him part of the future. Again, who knows, obviously, but he's been pretty consistently in the he's going to stay camp. I know Ray Fittipaldo's kind of been probably going to leave camp. So who knows? We'll see where it goes.
But there's no way this deal gets done under $9 million, though, right? If it gets done,
he should fire his agent immediately if that occurs.
Right. I agree there.
Who is his agent, by the way? I know we're way long on time here.
I knew the answer to that had you not asked. I'd have to read.
All right, next time. Don't worry about it.
Paul Brown's got one final question about Najee. He says, great article on Monday, fair market value contract extension on Najee Harris. I'm still in the camp of with Alex, where I don't think Najee receives a deal before the start of the regular season. He says, I'm not going to pretend to know I know what fair value is for a running back, but the way you laid it out, comparing it to Ramondre Stevenson, made a lot of sense. He says, what I don't understand is why would the Steelers sign Najee to a 1-year deal with 2 voidable years for $9.5 million, basically $9.5 million to $10.2 million, when they could have had him for $6.79 million, fifth-year option decline, seemingly based on precedent alone. Is there a reason other than precedent the Steelers would make the decision and then re-sign Najee for $9.5 million to $10.2 million? Also, is precedent, albeit mostly under another GM regime, worth the approximately $3 million difference when the Steelers have already broken the precedent in other areas? Back-to-back offensive linemen in first-round draft picks, TJ Watt guarantees, firing Matt Canada midseason, and said, look, the precedents that have been broken are each independent precedents. I don't think you can say until each. I think you got to look at each precedent in its own box, right? But it is a point still. The overarching point that Paul Brown makes is, look, all those precedents that we're talking about were under another GM. So, and we don't have a lot of track record to go off of Omar Khan. So there is that question out there. All I'll tell you in the big picture here, Paul, with what you're trying to lay across, once again, my whole contention that the theory that I've tried to lay out there is based on really 2 essential precedents. And that is Had they picked up the 5th-year option on Najee Harris, he technically would have had at that point 2 years remaining under contract, and the precedent has been to not do deals with non-quarterbacks with 2 years or more remaining on their deal. And then the second precedent that you would potentially be breaking there is how that looks to future players that you decide to pick up their 5th-year option on. Are those players then going to be having their hand out saying, look what you did at Najee? That has been the whole crux of, I don't want to say an argument, but just a theory. Mm-hmm. And once again, that theory, as you know, doesn't mean jack squat if the Steelers don't get a deal done with Najee before week 1. So once again, I have failed this. It sounds like I have failed this show miserably.
I just think it's a complicated situation, and it's a unique thought, and so I think people are just trying to grasp some of the particulars of it all.
Yeah, I don't think I've done a good job of laying out kind of what my theory is on this. If we still have people, if we're still getting emails on this, I think I've done a very poor job at laying out my side of this. I think you get it, right?
Yeah, no, I have some disagreements with it, but I understand the theory of the case.
All right. Well, I apologize if I've not made this clear, you know, my side of the theory here, but it is kind of a bit unnerving that we're getting emails like this that go away from kind of what my actual theory is here.
Yeah, but bottom line is we've got a month here to figure out what happens with Najee before camp. If it doesn't happen, we'll see what his posture is during camp and go from there.
All right, one last one from LM writes in, what round comp pick has been awarded for the type of contract you're thinking for Najee the past year or two? He says, I say use him this year and then let him walk and get the comp pick. I'm not here's the thing. If Najee leaves this team, it's probably not going to be until next offseason as an unrestricted free agent. And let's assume, which is dangerous to do, that he gets a deal similar to what I have laid out for this offseason, should he sign a deal, which is, you know, new money average around $9.5 million. You can't just slap a comp pick on him with that deal. A lot of things go into teams getting compensatory draft picks. It's the whole balance sheet thing here. Now, will him signing let's say a new money average of $9.5 million have a kind of a round value attached to it? Yes. What that is, we're still a year off from that. It's hard to say. I'm guessing it'd probably be in the, I don't know, 5th round value overall, potentially when it comes to that, but it's a long way out. But it does not. What I'm getting at here, LM, is if Najee rides off into the sunset next offseason at a $9.5 million APY, you just don't rubber stamp and say Steelers get a fifth round draft pick on it. Well, what is, you got to tell me what the Steelers have lost in free agency, what they've gained in free agency, and all like that. And then even all that, you know, once you get that hard math worked out there, you're still talking about this happening in the 2025 free agent period, which would not result in the actual compensatory pick in 2026.
Right, which means you could try to draft his replacement in Pittsburgh when the draft is held in 2026. But yeah, that is one, I think, and I'm not accusing the reader of it, but just in general, fans have to understand the comp pick. You're not guaranteed that selection. It's the value. It's a comp pick value that can be canceled out by other moves you might make.
All right, because we can't get enough Najee, it seems like. One last one from Jay. Great show. Definitely the best information on the Steelers out there. Jay, it must not be when a guy have people confused about kind of my theory on this Najee thing. But here's the question. There's been so much talk if a Najee extension will happen or not. What are your thoughts that the Steelers are just waiting to see how Najee and Warren play this year and sign whoever they want next year to a long-term contract? Could it be they didn't pick up the fifth-year option because they haven't decided if they want Najee or Warren? Your turn, Alex.
Yeah, I had mentioned this a little bit in the Monday live stream. Could there be a thought where do they want to potentially pay both running backs? Are they more inclined to want to pay Jalen Warren next year, for example, on a long-term extension? He won't get it this year. They'll play out the contract, but instead of tendering him, or they'll tender him and then work on an extension to help reduce that tender amount. Could that be the thought of which this team goes? I think it'll be very interesting to see what philosophy Pittsburgh ascribes himself to. Are they new age where running backs are fungible, don't pay anybody? Are they old school where they want to pay all these backs and keep both Harris and Warren on long-term deals? I'm not quite sure, but it'll be very telling to see how Omar Khan, this team, values running backs or don't value running backs based on what they do with Harris this year, next year, and Warren next year as well.
All right, let's make that the final question here. We're hour or so, almost coming up on 2 hours on this show.
And it was Doug Hendrickson was Najee's agent. That's the guy that clapped back at all those rumors. So we didn't know his name.
All right. Let's see. We will be back on Friday, right? Pending anything amazing happening.
Yeah, be back on Friday. I'm getting my training camp tickets right now, although Ticketmaster is bugging out. So we'll get there eventually. But yeah, we'll be back on Friday.
All right. If you're listening to this today, go buy that Scott Brown book. Get a Christmas in July, in June. How about that? Make a great stocking stuffer Christmas present, or just a great summer read between now and the start of training camp. You'll be supporting one of our own in Scott Brown. Also, you'll be really supporting Dick LeBeau, because the book's about Dick LeBeau. He spent a lot of time with Scott Brown and the other author here to get this done here. So get a jump on that. Be one of the first ones to own that book today. We will have information on this on social media and be talking more about it as we get on in through the rest of this month into training camp and all. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button and follow directions that way. So until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.